My name is Jeff Keltner. I am in charge of business development for Google Apps Education Edition. And so you probably noticed from the invitation that it was a little bit about education, but a lot about Google Apps. And so we did want to spend a good chunk of the time today talking about the Google Apps Education Edition and how that can work for you. So everybody talks about this, right? Google started as a PhD research project at Stanford University. A little bit of trivia so you can walk home and tell your spouses and children that you know something more about Google. It was called Backrub originally when it was a PhD research project because the concept behind the ranking algorithm was based on the scholarly practice of citing references to important works that had influenced you. And so they called that giving a back rub to your source, and so that was kind of the nickname of the project. So we've always, since this day, felt the fairly close tie to higher education. And we went from there to what I've been told is like a required by state law period for every technology company. It's the garage, right? So this is our garage in Menlo Park with Larry and Sergey back in the day. We actually recently bought this house. Eric said, I don't know what we're going to do with it, but I figured we should buy it now before it gets any more expensive. So we own the house. And from there, we've actually become a fairly large company. So about 14,000 employees, about 50 offices worldwide. Most of those are research-based, and they're in various parts of the world. We really spread it out because we said we need a lot of really, really smart people to do what we do here. And there's a limited number of them. Even in the wonderful mecca that Silicon Valley is for the smart technical folks, we run out. And so we're looking at where do we build offices, where do we go out to recruit a lot of smart people, and we've gone around the world. Now, you've heard this phrase today, but it is absolutely true that everyone at Google will recite on will the mission, which is to organize all the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. Right? And we've seen that today across a whole variety of types of content: video, books, text, the web, images. So we've gotten a lot of different ways that we've started to tackle that problem. But one area that we noticed, and this is where I come in, is that there was what I would call personal or institutional content. There was this stuff on my laptop. There was the stuff behind the firewall, the stuff in my databases, and I wanted to have access to that too in the same way. And so we created a group here at Google called Google Enterprise. And Google Enterprise was all about, simple mission, bring Google's technology inside of organizations. Help people leverage search and geospatial and all of our wonderful tools for internal, personal, institutional content. There's about 300 dedicated employees for Google Enterprise today who work exclusively around this mission. And we like to say that we stand on the shoulders of giants because those 300 leverage the core research and development. So when you look at our product lines, all of them benefit from all of the things that happen on what we call the other side of the street, the consumer operations business, where they're doing all of the innovation in Gmail and in Google Web Search, and we can bring those into the enterprise products that we provide to customers. Now, we have three major product areas in Google Enterprise. The first, this should not be surprising, is search. And we have two boxes, the yellow box and the blue box. The yellow box is called the Google Search Appliance. The blue box is called the Google Mini. And these are appliances, physical boxes that you install behind your firewall. They can do public website search, intranet search. If you get the big one, we can do secure search across databases, secured content by users. So bringing that power of search into the institutional content. So this is very powerful technology, bringing that search metaphor behind the firewall. The second, this is the most sexy technology, I like to say, at Google now. Even the president uses Google Earth on the internets, right? And Google Earth and Maps. So we find that there is a huge variety of geospatial information that people are looking at in spreadsheets and text documents. Even when I was in sales at IBM, I'd say, where are my most valuable customers? And I get a spreadsheet with cities and zip codes. Right? Why can't I look at that kind of information in a geospatial context? Why can't I look at, you got geophysics people saying, I got all this data, I've got floodplains. We've got a lot of business we do with Department of Homeland Security type folks who are looking at where are my emergency services vehicles, where is crime happening? How do I look at that data in a way that makes sense, given that it's location sensitive? So we have a series of products here in that space. And then finally, what I term the communication and collaboration space. So this is Google Apps. And this is what we'll dig into today. Now, I get asked a lot, Jeff, why on earth did you guys decide to get into this applications business? This is an enterprise space, and what made this interesting to you? This is what I'll say. We saw something happening on the internet. There was a trend of a vast amount of innovation going on in consumer services. So I look at things like YouTube, or I look at wikis, blogs, photo sharing. I look at instant messaging. And these were things, social networking, that emerged in the consumer space and had never really crossed over in the enterprise technology, right? So this huge level of innovation. And what this had led to, we saw, was a vastly increasing satisfaction amongst consumers in the technologies that they had access to. We also noticed this. The technologies they had access to within the institutional bounds, whether those were businesses or schools, was substantially lower, and they were diverging, right? My information technology as a consumer world was vastly outstripping what I had in the enterprise world. And we said, this is pretty simple. We should be able to do this, right? Let's bring those curves back together by leveraging the consumer technologies in the enterprise space, in the educational space. And so this is what we wanted to do. So I'd like to talk on this pitch a little bit about what we saw when we went out into the world today and talked to people using these technologies. What did you see? And I call this section Collaborating Like It's 1999. All right, so this is what's in. I'll tackle this from two angles. The first is what we saw from a user perspective. So we saw a couple of things. First, there was an absolute explosion in the volume of information people were dealing with. I get hundreds of emails a day, not 10 memos. I get an unbelievable number of PowerPoints and Word documents and Excel files on my desktop. I just have this volume of information that's ever increasing. And unfortunately, my tools weren't keeping up with me. And one of the things we saw was that people ran out of quotas, and they ended up in mail jail. Right? I worked at IBM. I had a 170 meg quota. I ran out about every 3 days. I spent about 6 hours getting myself out of mail jail because I stopped sending and receiving mail as soon as I hit that quota. Right? So technologies just weren't keeping up with what people were doing. Another area they weren't keeping up was the access points. Right? So users started accessing their data from everywhere. They were in internet cafes. They were in Bombay internet cafes, a hotel kiosk, on their cell phones, their BlackBerries, and then for the lucky few who can get approved for it, right? You get the blessed iPhone from Apple. But users all of a sudden had these devices. All of a sudden they could get to Google. They said, how come I can't get to my university email? Where's my calendar? Where are my documents? I have this great tool. Why can't I use it to do the things that are most important to me, right? The other challenge we really saw was that the tools weren't solving the problem that people faced. So most of the tools we see out there today are about individual productivity, but the challenge that our users are facing is about collaboration. It's about teamwork, right? We have cracked the nut of being a really great personal productivity tool. There's great tools out there for that, but they don't work when I've got 4 faculty members collaborating on curriculum, or worse, 10 faculty members at 6 different schools collaborating on a research project, or 4 students trying to write a team paper together. And if there's anything I've seen in my time working in education, it's that collaboration is becoming more and more and more critical to what we do in this space. And the fact that our tools weren't built for that is really becoming a problem for our users. And I'll give you my favorite example. I write a Word document. This doesn't happen very often because I don't use Word. But you write a Word document. I send it out to my 4 best friends who are working on this project with me, and 3 of them are kind enough to send it back. So I spend a couple hours, okay, change here, change there. I get version 2, and I send it back out, and the 3 are kind enough to send me some more revisions. But I've got a slow friend. Does everybody have a slow friend? The slow guy? So he goes back to version 1, Rachel, and she sends me this. And now I've got 4 versions off of different. What do I have here? And what I really found was this. My users were upset. They were frustrated. The tools weren't solving their problems. Right? So this was a major challenge for almost every institution I talked to. There was a second challenge, and this was on the IT side. And so we're trying to deploy extremely complex systems. If you look at the software it takes to do this, it's a nightmare, right? It's incredibly complex. And then if you can, sort this out and get it up and running, then it seems to break about every second week, or a patch comes out. So patch day Tuesday, I go around and I apply fixes to all my machines. And my life has seemed to break, patch, repeat, right? Just one big cycle. And now if you've been paying attention this year, spam and viruses are exploding. And so I talk to schools who have an ever-escalating budget just to deal with spam and viruses, right? Just to let people use the tools. And now if you've got it up and you've secured it from spam and viruses, now you've got to secure it because this is the most important information in the world to your users now. And you have to make sure it's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There is no such thing as planned downtime windows anymore, right? And my president's in China this week, and he's got to be up at 2 a.m. Right? So this is the world. And this is what my customers told me was going on. So we had PCs, and we bought software, and it was good. And we needed email, so we bought email servers, and it was okay. And we didn't want to manage all our identities just in email, so we bought a directory server. Then we needed bigger quotas, so we bought storage servers. Then my users wanted to collaborate. Then we had spam, so we bought a spam filter. They wanted to collaborate. I bought a content repository. Of course, I got more content, so I bought a second content repository. My content repository required a database. I bought a database and some hardware and a guy to run it. Then, of course, my faculty came and said, I must have BlackBerry. So we bought BlackBerries, and we bought BlackBerry Enterprise servers to run our BlackBerries. Then we realized that all of our critical information was here, so we bought a tape. We bought software and hardware, and we do tape backups. And then we started to realize that every critical piece of information for our business was now in this environment. So what do? We bought a second one of absolutely everything, right? Now we get two of everything. And then we spend our lives doing this, going around and fixing all the hardware and software that we bought. And then, now I talked to customers, and some have done this. Most just wish they'd done this. They hired an army of people to go around and keep this system up and running. Right? So this is the world, and I'm going to assume from the laughter in the crowd that this looks somewhat familiar to most people who are trying to do this today. Right? This is the world we're in. And what it really means at the end of the day to institutions is this. We're putting money down the drain. And we're not using our resources effectively. Now, how bad is that problem? Here's how bad the problem is. According to Gartner, a study in 2006, 8 out of every $10 spent on information technology is dead money. It doesn't drive the needle forward for our users. It doesn't make the business any better. 8 out of $10. That's terrible. That's only 2 out of $10 that are driving any productivity improvements, any benefits to our students, any new services for our faculty. That's just plain old not acceptable. Right? So we think there has to be a better way to do this. And we think the first step is to look at something Geoffrey Moore said. Geoffrey Moore wrote several influential books here in the Valley. And in one of them he said, the core processes to any organization are the things that differentiate you in the market. They're the things that cause your constituents to choose you versus somebody else. I would submit that for an educational institution, it's the quality of the teaching, quality of the facilities, quality of the curriculum. It is not your email service. Right? I have yet to meet a student who said, I wanted to go to this school, but the email was kind of so-so, so I went to this other place because they had a really nice email. They had instant messaging. And that was it. Right? So this is not what's core. And the problem I see is this. We're spending the vast majority of our money on context. Right? Everything that's not core is context. And this is where most of us are in our budgets today. And this is not effective at driving our core mission forward. And so what we want to do is change this to this, where we're spending the bulk of our time and money actually driving the needle forward in education. And I heard a great quote from somebody who said, education today looks like education in the 1600s, right? I mean, if Abraham Lincoln walked into a classroom, he'd see a blackboard up front, he'd see students sitting in desks, he'd see a lecture, a test, and then he'd be able to pass a class, right? It would look exactly like it did when he went to school. That's crazy, because technology has changed so many industries. And so we want to help people move to this world where we can focus on how do we actually change our core and not so much time on the context. We think Google's a good partner in this area. And I'll put up 4 quick bullets, and then I'll get into some details. The first is a focus on the user. And I think this is critical, because way too much software today is written that doesn't really solve the problems of the user. And I'll say in several instances, actually causes more problems than it solves. So really, how do we solve the problems that the users are facing? This is something that is one of the 5 fundamental beliefs in Google, is always focus on the user, doing right by the user, and solving their own problem. Second, I think there's a trend towards cloud computing. This concept that I have access to my data absolutely anywhere. Access is ubiquitous. I'm at my computer lab. I'm on my iPhone. I'm in an internet cafe. I don't want to have to have my clients access my data. And from an IT perspective, it's this. It's leveraging Google Supercomputer. I don't want to have to run the IT infrastructure to provide that. And we think we've built here at Google what is the lowest cost to compute supercomputer in the world for certain kinds of applications. And so we're able to provide these at an incredibly low price point, in fact, in your case, free, because of the infrastructure we've built to run these services. And the final point is about innovation. Right? Users today expect innovation. They expect enhancements. They expect improvements. They expect you to see the next best thing. Education used to be there in technology. And we think that we have really been able to set the gold standard in terms of innovating and driving the needle forward from a user perspective. And so we think that makes us a good partner here. Now, what exactly is Google Apps? I got all of my funny slides out of the way with all the great images. But what are we really talking about here? I make 3 points about Google Apps. The first is it's a series of user-centric applications. So really focused on collaboration and user productivity. Specifically, it's Gmail, Google Talk, which is our instant messaging client, Google Calendar, which is an iCal-based group calendaring system, Google Documents and Spreadsheets, and this is an online collaborative word processing spreadsheet environment for users. And we have discussed that we will be adding presentations to that mix at some point in the future. Google Personalized Start Page. So if you're familiar with iGoogle or the Customize My Homepage button on Google.com, this is the concept of a portal experience for the user that has customized content for them. And I always like to put this one up here. There will be more. Right? So we see this as a growing set of offerings. This is not a static thing. And we plan to continue enhancing this. Second core piece. It runs on our stuff. Right? There's no hardware. There's no software. There's nothing to buy. There's nothing to install. You just set it up and turn it on. It's very easy. And I would submit, I got the guys to give me the shot of one of the Google data centers today. I would submit that there is nowhere better in the world to have your services running than on Google's infrastructure. We built it to be as secure and reliable as possible. I will say this about our infrastructure. We built it with two assumptions in mind. One, everything we put in the data center will break. Two, at any given time, at least one thing we put in the data center will be broken. And so we built our own operating system, our own file system. We built our own hardware. And we did it all with the assumption that everything was going to break in there at some point. How do you build an environment that allows you to continue running Google.com in that world? And I think we've done pretty well because I ask most users, how do you know if the internet's up? They say, I go to Google.com. If Google's not up, then the internet's not working. Right? That's your troubleshooting, Google.com, because it's never down. Right? So this is the infrastructure we built to run that, and this is the infrastructure we provide to customers. Final point, we built this as a platform. So this is back to that. We plan to continue enhancing it. And not only to adding new applications, but to continuing to improve the existing applications. And I'll give you some quick examples. If you look at the history of Google Mail, Google Apps, in 2004, we put out Gmail. In the intervening 2.5, 3 years, we added instant messaging, we added calendars, we created the branded experience of Google Apps, added documents and spreadsheets, created a start page editor. Right? This is a very fast pace of innovation in terms of adding enhancements to that application set. Gmail was born as a consumer service in 2004. And if you look more recently, just since February, we've added a slew of features into Google Apps. The various applications almost go a weekly updating for new enhanced features. Some of my favorites, charts and graphs and documents and spreadsheets, right? It's a major requested feature. So we built it, we rolled it out there. What happened? One day you logged in and there was a button to create a chart. Right? So it's moving to this model of versionless computing. Somebody often asks me, what do you think about versions of computing? I say, what version of Gmail are you running? Any idea? So 1.0, 2.0, 2.5? Doesn't make any sense. Because in this world, the applications are continuously updated. And that's how we really view this as a platform, because the innovation keeps coming. There are 3 editions of Google Apps. We're going to talk specifically in depth about one today. Standard edition, free for anybody on the internet who would like to use Google Apps. A couple of key points. Email addresses and identities are all at your domain. You control entirely the namespace. You create the accounts, you delete the accounts, and they do bear your domain name. Customize the experience with your own logo, and you get 2 GB mail quotas for all your users. This is usually a pretty good number compared to what most schools are offering today. Although I've run into one that offers larger quotas, and I was a little surprised. Right? So this is the standard version. Now we said we really want to go into the educational space and make an offering that makes sense for an institution, and this is not quite it. So we added a couple of things to make our education edition. Specifically, we kept it free and said use it for faculty, students, staff, alumni, heck, parents, anybody you'd like to use it for. We'll allow you to remove the advertising for students, and we haven't said this before today, but for students and staff. We understand that a lot of institutions have serious issues with the concept of advertising in their applications, and so we will allow you to remove that for your students and for your faculty and staff, for your employees. That is new for the staff today, so it goes out in a press release this afternoon. Hey! We got applause, Dan. That must be a good thing. We added some enhanced integration capabilities, and I'll go into these in a little bit of detail towards the end. But to say that you're not a bunch of, this is not a vanity domain. This is not jeff@keltner.com. I have existing tools to manage my users, to manage my authentication. I need to tie into those capabilities. So we provided those capabilities to you. And finally, we offer phone support for free for administrators. This is not end users. This is not a big call center for all your students to call and say, hey, how do I do this in Gmail? But for your administrators, for critical issues, when the system's not working, you give us a call. We have a team ready to answer the phone and to make sure that the service is working for you. So we really wanted to put an offering out there that was going to make sense for a school to pick, not just for a student to pick. And we think this was what we needed to do. The last piece of this, we have a Premier Edition. We do sell this. Some parts of Google actually like to charge for products. I'm not big on it, but it's out there. So we sell this to businesses. We give them one thing that we don't give you. We give them 10 GB mail quotas. And for that privilege, we charge them $50 per user per year. Now, this is a pretty good price in the enterprise world. If you're looking at faculty and staff, this would be a pretty low price point compared to what most people are running for that today. But this is what we sell to businesses, right? So the thing I like is there's not very many points on this slide for what is to businesses but not to educational institutions. And this one doesn't apply to you. So there it is. What's that?
For certain high-level users,
can you buy it if you want it?
Well, I know some of our users do have 5 and 6 gigs of mail sitting around.
So the answer today is we don't have a default way to give you larger quotas for certain users, and we don't have a process for charging you for it. But if you brought me a check, I'm pretty sure I'd find a way to make it work. So I'm not opposed to it conceptually, but it's not something that we have really crossed the bridge. But I do think that the plan is over time to have some of these enhanced kind of services that would be for a fee. Anybody who runs email service today will tell you that the most expensive part by far is the storage. So this has a real dollar cost to us. We're not opposed to offering it, but we have to figure out the right pricing model to do that. So talk to me afterwards. Yeah. So I want to walk through the applications now and kind of give you an example of how some students might use this and show you a little bit what they're about. So this is our personalized start page. How am I doing on time? How bad am I on? Oh, I'm doing well. All right, personalized start page. This is the portal environment. I like to call it your personal dashboard, right? And so interesting things about it. First, you'll see plotted out here. You get to brand it yourself, put your own logo on it, your look and feel, your colors, right? We put one thing on there. Surprise, surprise, it's an internet search box and a little logo that says powered by Google. This is Google's contribution to what we put on this page. I think the interesting thing about this environment is that it combines 3 kinds of content. The first is personal content for the user. And so this is my email, my calendar, my documents, all the things that are kind of mine. Second piece is school-related content. And so you'll see here that we allow you to create your own modules here. We call them Google Gadgets and publish them just to your users. And then those gadgets can have things like blogs of news updates from the school. Even here we've got a sample version where I'm tying into existing systems and pulling out the list of courses the student is registered for. Here I'm taking an economics class with Professor Page. He's one of my favorites. And I've got a directory search here so I can actually search my university. So I've got school institutional content combined here as well. And then I've got public content. And this is where a lot of portal experiments in the past have really failed, is that users came and said, hey, I want the weather, I want the news, I want the traffic, I want my Google Maps. Where is all the other stuff that you're not providing me? And so what we've done here is allow you to combine all 3 of these into a seamless experience. So this is personalized start page. So I'm now a student logged in. My name is Jeff. That's very ironic for me. And I come in and I see in my start page I have a message in my inbox from Chris about an econ project. And I know that Professor Page assigned me a problem set that I have to work on, and I'm working on it with Chris. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to open my email inbox. So here I clicked right on that message. I said, bring me to my email inbox. So a couple things to point out. You'll notice, again, the branded logo for the email interface, right? So I've got that university feel. I've, of course, got my university email address, right? Jeff@googleuniversity.org, a little fictitious school I made up. Nobody had registered that domain yet. And I've got search across my email. If you've never used Gmail with a high volume of email and found the power of search across your email, it will change your life. It really, really will. This is incredibly powerful. But today, I just want to look at my message. And so I see here the message that Chris sent. Now, you'll notice in parentheses a little 6. The 6 indicates that there are actually 6 messages in a thread, and Gmail has combined all of them into one item in my inbox. If you've never used this feature before, this will also change your life. I frequently get off the airplane. I have 60 messages in a thread, and I look at the last one. It says, everything's good. I say, archive. 60 messages, gone. Right, this is how I keep up with the volume of information in my world. So I need to open my message to see what I need to do. So I click here, and here's my message. Now, you see a couple of things. You'll see a couple of messages that are collapsed. These are messages I've already read. One is still open because I started, and starred messages are always kept open. You can see the last message. So you can see here this concept of threading where we really look at email stream as a conversation. All right, so I've got a conversation going on. Next thing you'll notice, it's got a little button that says reply by chat. Now, instant messaging, in case the students haven't told you. They really like to use the instant messaging. Right? In fact, they told the Chronicle of Higher Ed that email is for old people. This was the day I found out that I had become old. Right? It did not dawn on me yet. Right? So I'm going to go ahead and reply by chat, and you'll see that right here in the web browser, no extra client, I'm going to open up a little window. I'm going to have an instant message communication with Chris. Now, that message is going to be archived along with my email, and it's actually going to show up in the thread just like another email message. So I'll have 5 emails. I'll have an instant message, maybe some more emails in the end. This is a very powerful way of converging those 2 forms of communication that really aren't that different. They're electronic text-based communication, and I'd really like to bring them together, search across them as they're becoming my primary method of communication. So I have a couple of little bit of chat there with Chris. We agreed that we're going to meet up on Thursday to talk about the project. So the next thing I need to do, of course, is hop into my calendar. Oh, I forgot one fun point. This is terrible. I didn't know my presentation. So one thing I'll point out here, you'll see I've got my awareness of other buddies. And two things to point out. You'll see one up here is labeled Jeff Keltner Google. This is a google.com account. Another one is labeled ASU student. This is actually an account I have in the ASU domain. And so this is a federated protocol, so you can actually communicate with anyone in the internet using the Jabber protocol on any domain. So this is not just your students. They can talk with students at other schools. Google Talk users, they know me. They can talk to me at google.com. So you have the instant messaging capability across a wide variety of domains and areas because we're using an open standard to do that. So now I'm going to hop in and I'm going to create my calendar event. So I open up my calendar. This is what Google Calendar looks like. I'm going to point out a couple of things to you here about Google Calendar. Really just one that I think is really important. And that's this concept of multiple calendars. You see on the left-hand side a list of calendars that I've subscribed to. Some of them are mine. Some of them are other calendars, public calendars. And I break these down again into three areas. There's a group that I've subscribed to, and you'll see them all color-coded. So all the events in dark blue, my personal events for the week. This is what I've got going on. In purple is a calendar that I created for an organization that I'm a member of. In fact, I'm the president, let's say, of that organization. And so I'm creating the events. I'm sharing that calendar with all of my members, and so they can immediately have exactly the same view I do with the updated schedule for all the events going on for that group. A lot of schools are using this for alumni events. They're using this for sporting schedules. They're using this for course schedules. You can put a lot of different information into those iCal feeds, and then the students have immediate up-to-date information about these. The last area is public calendars. Now, I happen to be a big golf fan. I always love watching golf. And so this week it was the PGA Championship. It was Tiger Woods winning last week, right, the PGA. And so I was able to have a public calendar created by the PGA that I also overlay because I always want to know where the PGA is playing and what TV channel I can flip on when I get home from work and relax by watching some golf. So we've again taken the personal, the institutional, and the public and combined it into one place. It's a very powerful set of features. So now I create my event to meet with my Chris on my Econ 101 project. So this is what an event that you've created looks like. A couple of basic things for you. First of all, invite guests. They can accept, decline. So here we can see that Chris has actually accepted. He's agreeing to come. Thank you, Chris, to my event on Thursday. He's sitting in the back of the room. I can create repeating events. I can do this weekly, monthly, daily, Tuesday, Wednesdays, Thursdays, whatever it is. But create that scheduling concept of a recurring meeting event. So kind of the basic things you expect in a calendar, including this one that surprises a lot of people. We have reminders. So we can do pop-ups. We can do, and this will be very popular with your students, I promise, SMS text messages as reminders for events. Right? Students love to text message these days. You can actually fully interoperate with Google Calendar over text messaging. You can send it a message and say, what's my agenda for the day? What's the next event? Put something on my calendar directly from SMS. Right, so a couple of options here for my event. And the last thing you'll see is this concept of checked guest and resource availability. And so if I click on that, this was a frequently requested feature that we have recently added to the education and premier version of Google Apps. And so I've now pulled up a window. I can see Chris and my schedules, our availability over the next couple of days to schedule a meeting. And of course, there's not a lot on here because it's a fake calendar. And I can also add resources like meeting rooms, projectors, any sort of resource you want to schedule. I can limit the availability. And then right here, I can say what resources are available. I want to schedule that meeting room for my meeting. Right? So very rich enterprise-level calendaring kind of functionality. So I scheduled my meeting, and now I got to hop in, and I got to actually, God forbid, do my homework. So I'm going to pull up my documents and spreadsheets. A couple things to notice. You'll see a very easy way to look at your documents and spreadsheets. I can see with the icons what is what. I can also organize these into folders. A little secret for you. You can put a document into multiple folders. So they work a lot like labels. But again, the capability to organize your documents to add structure to that if you want to, but also, of course, search across all of your documents as well. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my spreadsheet here. I'm doing my work in my spreadsheet. I got a couple of things going on here. The first thing I'll point out, this is not pivot tables and complex stuff, but it is formulas, right? So I've got sums over here. We can do a lot of fairly complicated formulas. So I've pulled together some formulas. I've got some sums. I'm doing my homework. I even wanted to have a couple of different tabs in the spreadsheet so I could work on question 1A and question 1B in different tabs. So now I've got my work going on. I'm putting tabs in. I'm using my formulas. And as of a couple of weeks ago, I can create a graph out of the data in my spreadsheet, and I can now have that graph in my spreadsheet, right? So kind of the functionality you'd expect to have in a documents and spreadsheets capability. Now I need to go ahead and put this into my actual paper that I'm going to turn in to Professor Page because he's a real stickler on formatting, and so I got to put it in a document. So I open up my Google Doc. You can see a couple of things here. So I've formatted text. I've actually copied these cells right out of Google Spreadsheets, tossed them into my document. Right, I've used colors, I've used formatting, all the things that people say, well, you can't really do that in a web-based word processor. Yeah, you can do a lot of the things you need to do. So I've got this going on. Now you'll notice one other thing right here. I've actually had Chris is logged into the document right now at the same time he's also editing this. So the real power of these tools is this concept of collaborative editing. And so now Chris and I are both in here. Maybe he's working on question 2, I'm working on question 1, at the same time working off the same real copy of the document. Really getting away from this email me back and forth. And what's the true version? The true version is the current version. It doesn't even make sense to ask that question anymore. So when I finish up, I'm going to need to share this document with my professor. So I go up here in my Publish and Share section. I click. You can see immediately who's been added as a collaborator. So myself, Chris, and a friend of ours named Samantha, added as collaborators. You can also add viewers. I could right from here schedule a meeting with them to talk about my document. I could email them all to say, hey, I've updated it. Please take a look. Right? Or I can go and I can add new collaborators or new viewers. And so in this case, I'm going to go and I'm going to add Professor Page as a view only so that he can actually look at my document and see the work that I've done. Right, so a very simple example to walk you through how these tools could be used by students in an academic setting. Very powerful. There also are, of course, there's some administrative capabilities. So right here, you've got the ability, this is where you log into a web console, you create your users, you upload your logo, you customize the services. This is really where you'll manage the service from in a web-based way. But as I said, we also added some advanced integration capabilities. And so specifically, we wanted to allow you to manage this through other applications. And there's a couple key areas I'll talk about. The first, managing of accounts. This is creation, deletion, suspension of accounts. Right? You can do that via API calls, and so you can do it, tie into an LDAP, tie into any other systems, and have this managed from a single central place. Second thing is authentication. So a lot of people, welcome the guys from ASU, and they do this, but they want to use their own authentication mechanism. And so we support the SAML 2.0 protocol. The SAML 2.0 allows us to basically redirect users to your site, and you'll authenticate them off of whatever backend system you have, whether that's Shibboleth, a Yale CAS, even a Windows Active Directory system. And then once you've done that, you'll assert to us who the user is. So you control, at this point, the authentication of your users. Third point is the mail gateway capability. This is a technical way of saying that if you want to have a world where your students are on Google, your teachers are on Exchange, I don't agree with the choice, but you might want to make it. Your faculty are on Exchange, but they want to share the same school.edu address, that's fine. We'll absolutely support your ability to do that by routing the mail to yourself and just picking those users that you want to have using Google. So the ability to do this. Also relevant if you want to filter the mail for content, if you want to keep an archival copy for e-discovery purposes, all incoming and outgoing mail routed through whatever system you're looking for. Last point. Migration capability. So we want you to be able to bring data in and out very easily. We have a series of APIs around this, the most important of which is the ability to crawl an IMAP existing mail store and pull those messages into Gmail so that your users don't lose their entire mail history when they come to the Google Apps product. A couple of key integration capabilities. Now, most of the people I talk to, and we're getting towards the end here, most of the people I talk to have two key questions for us about this. This is really great, Jeff. I like where you're going. I see the product said security and privacy. Talk to me about security and privacy. These are really critical to us. So I'll talk very briefly about security and privacy. I see the Google guys in the back used to run security perking out, saying, what's he going to say? First, I'm not going to go into detail on this slide. I'm just going to let it build behind me. We take a very comprehensive view of security. We view it from a whole different host of angles, starting with physical security, logical security of specific machines, right? Intrusion detection, not intellectually, kind of higher level security of the individual applications, user-based security. And then, of course, this is an ongoing process. So anybody who tells you that we have security solved, you can't solve security. Security is an ongoing, never-ending process. So we have a huge, I won't say huge, we have a large team in place whose job is to look at our processes, to manage, to look and work with the community for existing issues that may emerge, and how do we respond to those. And then also, how do we deal with regulatory and compliance issues? So we really like to look at this at a whole host of different areas. And to be honest, the folks that have come in and taken a close look at what we do for security have walked in saying, I really like it, but you'll never be secure enough for this to make sense. I had a Fortune 500 that walked in, they told me that. They sat down with the CIO. They walked out and they said, we want to do this soon because you're so much more secure than we've ever been that we feel a lot better if you would just take all our data. Right? So we really view this as a core competency, and we think this is a real benefit when you really look at how we're doing it. I think the second area is much more critical. That's privacy. Now, I had to pull a lot of lawyers' teeth to get us to put even anything up on the screen about what we do around privacy, but I got a couple of real basic points for you. And that is, we have what we think is the industry-leading privacy policy, and we really want to be very open and forthright about what we do with data and how we protect it. And so we have a couple basic policies. Number one, we don't share data with outside parties or anybody unless we absolutely have to. Rule number one, just don't share the data. If you don't have to, don't do it. So we don't share this with third parties. We don't share it with our advertisers. It's just not the right thing to do. If you ask us to remove your data, I know this will shock a lot of people. We actually just go ahead and remove your data. So when you go into Gmail and click delete, and you go into your trash bin, you say delete forever, people have asked me, can you get it back when you say delete forever? I say, no, when you said delete forever, we deleted it forever, and it's gone. Right? So we think that you should have control over the data you put here. If you want it to be gone, it should be gone. And that's the practice that we have in place. The last piece of this, and this is not as critical for this group, unless there's anybody from overseas, but we adhere to the US-EU safe harbor provisions, which is to say that the EU data privacy provisions are something that we've signed on to, and so people in the EU can safely say that my data is safe, even if it's not within the bounds of the EU here at Google. So, of course, there are certain instances where we do have to share data with third parties. And so we do that only very limited circumstances, and those are these. When the user says, go ahead and share my content, we'll go ahead and share their content. When we have to give data to third parties that are subsidiaries for purposes of processing, for a variety of different reasons, we may do that. When we do that, every third party we give the data to is bound by our privacy policy. This doesn't happen much, but there are certain areas where we use outside parties to do certain processing. But all of the times we do that, the privacy policy is something all of those third parties must agree to before we can do this. And then finally is this, if reasonably necessary too. And this is the basic stuff. If it's necessary to follow an applicable law, right? If it's necessary for imminent harm or threat. So if there's a bomb threat and the police come to us and say, hey, we need to know what that user said about the bomb because we need to make sure the bomb doesn't go off on campus, we're going to work with that law enforcement agency in that case. If there's a case, and I know some of my customers, what if a user comes and we think that there's a suicide potential and we want to get access to that data to hopefully prevent that occurrence? Right? In that case, we'll work with the appropriate law enforcement agencies. We'll get that data out where we think it's reasonably appropriate to prevent imminent harm or threat. Right? So we have certain areas where we will access the data, but only under these very limited circumstances. So we really want to do as much as we can to protect the data and give it out only when we absolutely have to, and that we're very transparent about what that absolutely have to would mean and what those situations would be. So now that we've talked about the hard questions, I say, does anybody actually do this? Or is this just nice Google speak for what you can do? And I'll talk about one thing for sure. So we use this. Eric decided, when we decided to roll this product out, I said, thou shalt use thine own dog food. And it was so, and it was good. And so we rolled out a project, and we actually called it Google Dog Food. So that's the name of our internal use of Google Apps. We created our own customized logo. It looks like a dog bowl with all of our application logos in it. Right? And we switched over from Oracle Calendar. We moved everything into Google, and this is the suite of tools that we use internally. And we use it internally, not in our own sandboxed environment with all sorts of extra protections. We use it on the public infrastructure. It's registered exactly like you would register your domain. And so we use the public infrastructure, the public versions of the applications to run our company. So if you experience pain around anything, I promise you we're experiencing it. And also, we have about 14,000 extremely demanding users who are always pushing forward on the next thing that they need added to the application. And so we really felt it was important that we were using the tools that we were working with customers on. So real briefly, we have a couple of other folks who are using this, and this is a short list. I've got two of them here today, and we're going to take a short break after this, and we'll let them tell their own stories. But Northwestern Arizona State. You can see some others listed up here that are using or plan to start using this soon. And we have a lot, actually, who are overseas that I didn't put up here, but around the world. And so we've been very proud to see this application adopted by a large number of institutions from around the world as a great solution for their students. So to sum up, because I always say, tell them what you're going to tell them what you told them, right? I think there are four critical things about Google Apps. The first one is communication, right? It's about helping your users communicate more effectively, more efficiently. Right? It's about enhancing communication. It's also about collaboration, and I think this is the critical aspect where we haven't been doing a good job in the past. How do we think about groups of people working together and calendaring and documents and instant messaging? How do we drive the needle forward in the area of collaboration? It's about simplification. How do I lower my cost to provide services? How do I simplify my IT environment, my world, so that I can focus on my core business? And I often want to relabel this redeploy resources. Right? How do I get the people that are keeping email up and running and have them thinking about driving my educational mission forward with the technology that's there? This is critical for every school out there today to be thinking about. And finally, it's about innovation. It's about innovating, and how do you catch the level of innovation. I like to call it the rocket of innovation that is Google. How do you innovate at the pace that we do? I think the easiest way to innovate at the pace that we do is to use our tools. Right? So it's about how do you keep driving that needle forward at the rate that users expect today.